Today I want to talk about something that I think a lot of people who identify as INFJ have quietly felt at some point, but maybe never fully put into words. And that feeling is this: am I even really an INFJ? Am I actually an introvert? Or am I just pretending to be something I am not? I know that might sound strange. Why would someone doubt their own personality type? But if you are an INFJ, or if you think you might be, you probably already know exactly what I am talking about. Because this personality type is genuinely one of the most confusing ones to live inside of. And the confusion does not just come from other people misreading you. It often comes from misreading yourself. Let me explain what I mean. One of the defining traits of INFJs is deep empathy. And I do not mean empathy in the casual sense, where you feel a little sorry for someone who is having a hard day. I mean the kind of empathy where you actually absorb what another person is going through, where you sit with their pain as if it were your own, where you watch a show or read a story and the emotions hit you so hard that you have to take a moment afterward just to come back to yourself. It is like your emotional system does not have a strong enough wall between you and the people or stories around you. Things get in deeply, and they stay for a while. Because of this, INFJs often feel like they have lived many different emotional lives. You carry the weight of conversations you had years ago. You process other people's problems with the same intensity that you process your own. You watch someone struggle, and you do not just observe it. You feel it in your chest. And when you are someone who processes that much from that many directions, it becomes genuinely hard to know where you end and where everyone else begins. That blurry line is one of the reasons why INFJs sometimes feel like they are not being authentic. Because you have absorbed so many different emotional experiences, so many different ways of thinking and reacting and seeing the world, that it can feel like you are made of borrowed pieces rather than something entirely your own. And that feeling, if you let it sit too long without understanding it, starts to look like doubt. It starts to feel like maybe you are not who you think you are. Now, let me add another layer to this because I think it makes the confusion even more interesting. INFJs are natural mirrors, not always on purpose, and not in a calculating way. But when you are deeply attuned to the people around you, you naturally pick up on their energy, their communication style, their tone, their pace. And without even thinking about it, you start to adjust. You soften your energy when someone seems nervous. You match someone's enthusiasm when they are excited. You slow down when the person you are talking to needs more space. This mirroring is not fake. It is actually a deeply human thing to do. Most people do it to some degree. But INFJs tend to do it more intensely and more automatically than most. The problem is that when you spend a lot of time adjusting yourself to fit the emotional temperature of whoever you are with, you can start to forget what your natural temperature actually is. You come home from a long day of conversations and interactions, and you feel like you do not quite recognize yourself. And that unfamiliar feeling gets misread as inauthenticity, when really, it is just the cost of being someone who is extremely sensitive to the people around them. Here is where the fake introvert idea comes in, and honestly, this is something I deal with a lot in my own life. I talk to people for a living. I hold conversations with students every day, many of whom are self-described shy introverts who are not confident in their English. And because part of my job is to make them feel comfortable enough to speak, I bring energy into the room. I ask questions. I laugh. I keep things moving. I do what needs to be done to make the conversation work. And the result is that many of my students are completely convinced that I am an extrovert. Some of them insist on it. I have had conversations where I try to explain that I am actually an introvert and they just laugh and say, "No, you are not, look at how you talk." And I get it. From the outside, it probably does look like extroversion. But what they do not see is what happens after. The need to sit in quiet. The decompression that has to happen before I feel like myself again. The tiredness that is not physical but something deeper, something that only goes away when I have had enough time alone to reset. That part is invisible to them because they only see me when I am in performance mode, which is what social interaction feels like for many introverts even when they are good at it. Being good at something does not mean it comes naturally without a cost. An introvert who has learned to hold conversations confidently is not a fake introvert. They are just a skilled one. And there is a big difference. Now let me talk about the imposter syndrome piece, because I think this is where a lot of INFJs get stuck. Imposter syndrome, in simple terms, is when you feel like you are not really qualified for or authentic in the role you are in, even when all the evidence says otherwise. It is that nagging voice that says you are pretending, that the real you is something else, that at some point people are going to figure out that you have been putting on an act. For INFJs, this can show up specifically around their personality type. You read about what an INFJ is supposed to be like, and some of it fits perfectly and feels like finally being seen. But then you notice the parts that do not seem to match your behavior in a given moment, and the doubt creeps in. Maybe you were unusually talkative today. Maybe you did not feel particularly intuitive about a situation. Maybe you struggled to empathize with someone when you are usually the person who feels everything. And instead of accepting that people have complicated days and that no personality type is expressed perfectly all the time, you start to wonder if the label was wrong to begin with. Here is the thing, though. A personality type is a general description of your natural tendencies. It is not a rigid script that you follow every single moment of every day. Even the most introverted person has days where they feel social. Even the most empathetic person has moments where they are too depleted to feel much at all. Those variations do not cancel out the pattern. They are just the normal range of being a human being living a full and complicated life. The self-doubt that comes from being an INFJ is also connected to how rarely people around us actually understand us. Because we can adapt and mirror and perform social competence when needed, people often assume they know what kind of person we are based on those surface moments. And when the description they have of us does not match how we actually experience ourselves, we are the ones left feeling like something is off. Not them. Us. Because we are the ones doing the internal work of trying to make sense of the gap between how we appear and how we actually are. One way I have found helpful for managing this is to stop measuring myself against other people's experience of me and start paying attention to my own consistent patterns over time. Not in a specific moment, but across time. Do I generally feel drained after long periods of social interaction, even when I enjoyed them? Yes. Do I have a small number of deep relationships rather than a large number of surface ones? Yes. Do I spend a lot of time in my own head, processing and analyzing and making sense of things? Absolutely yes. Do I feel things deeply, including things that are not even my own experiences to feel? Without a doubt. Those patterns, taken together, tell me something real about who I am. They do not change just because I had a good day socially, or because a student told me I seem like an extrovert. Your personality is not defined by your best performance day. It is defined by what your baseline actually looks like when nobody is watching, and when you're not trying to be anything for anyone. So, how do you stop doubting yourself when the confusion keeps coming up? I think the first thing is to stop expecting your experience of being an introvert to look like a stereotype. Not all introverts are quiet and awkward in social settings. Not all introverts avoid people. Some of us are actually quite capable socially. We just pay a price for it that others do not always see. Accepting that your version of introversion is valid, even if it does not match the most obvious version of it, is an important first step. The second thing is to give yourself permission to be multi-layered. You are allowed to love deep conversation and also need 3 days of quiet afterward. You are allowed to make people laugh in a room full of strangers and also feel utterly exhausted on the drive home. You are allowed to be warm and engaging in some contexts and completely withdrawn in others. None of those things are contradictions. They are just different expressions of the same complicated person. The third thing, and this one is specifically about mental health, is to notice when the self-doubt is being triggered by external pressure rather than genuine internal uncertainty. When someone insists you are an extrovert, or when you feel pressure to perform in ways that do not feel natural, and then you start to wonder if they are right and you have been wrong about yourself all along, pause. Ask yourself whether that doubt started from inside you or whether it was planted by someone else's assumption. Most of the time, for INFJs, the doubt is borrowed. Someone questioned us, and because we are naturally inclined to consider other perspectives seriously, we picked up their question and started carrying it as if it were our own. You are allowed to put it back down. Being flexible does not mean being fake. Adjusting how you show up in different situations is not inauthenticity. It is intelligence. It is emotional awareness. It is exactly the kind of thing that makes INFJs so effective in so many different environments. The key is to stay connected to yourself underneath all that flexibility. To know what you actually need, what actually drains you, what actually matters to you, and to protect those things even when the world around you is telling a different story about who you are. You are not a fake introvert. You are not a failed extrovert. You are not performing some identity you stumbled into by accident. You are just a person who is complex enough that simple labels feel insufficient sometimes. And that complexity is not a problem. It is actually one of the most honest things about you. Thanks for watching. If this video resonated with you, please consider hitting the subscribe button. I am currently working toward my goal of 1,000 subscribers so I can finally monetize this channel and turn this passion into a sustainable part of my future. This is my unfiltered diary of solo living in the Philippines, and your support helps me keep this channel growing. If you would like to help out even more, you can check out the Buy a Treat for My Pets link in the description. My dogs definitely appreciate the love. Make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss the next update. Thank you for being such an important part of this journey. I will see you in the next one.